Yeah. Yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Dynasty Gambit here on the Going for Two Live Network. I'm one of your co-hosts, Kyle Senra. Gator J is here. Might not have him much in this month of June, where we do have 3 episodes of the Gambit. So we'll take a gambit on whether he's here or not. But for now, joined by one of my co-hosts, Brian, the Vandy grad. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Kyle. Just glad to be here. Like you said, June 1st. Pretty nice weather out there here in Nashville, Tennessee. So glad to spend an hour with everybody, do a little talking football.
Well, it was so hot that I had forgot to turn my fan on. I wanted to wait as long as possible. But yeah, sweat this out for now. But glad to be here on the Gambit with our guest for this week, Brian Ford, one of the co-hosts of the Dynasty Saturday Night 5 here on the Going for Two Live Network. So, Brian, we had you on, I believe, before the draft. You joined us on the draft special, which eventually you took over. We appreciate that. Glad to have you back on.
Thanks for having me. Yeah. Also, getting warm here in the Northeast. It almost hit 90 today, which I think in Canada terms is 25.4 times the radius of pi. I don't know whatever the hell you all do up there. But also, a happy Pride Month to all the rainbow comrades out there.
It's a nice way of putting that. Rainbow comrades. I like it. That is such a Brian Ford way to state that. So yes, I guess June 1st. So we are celebrating Pride Month. So we're all proud to be fantasy football analysts. If fantasy football is fun and easy, but yeah, there's certainly some people who still in places of the world are persecuted and prosecuted for things that they shouldn't be, including gender or sexual orientation. So as much as we think about the things domestically that have gotten better, we also think about those throughout the world who are in places where that is a real struggle. So hope to raise awareness for that and be positive beacons of light for everyone. But yay, fantasy football. That's the positivity and the fun part. And we've done a lot of talk about rookie drafts, rookies basically for about 2 months. As we enter June, maybe this is the time to leave rookie draft talk away. I think I've got maybe 4 rookie drafts left, a couple in June, and then a couple that'll probably be like in August. So scattered to the point where we can kind of take a fuller grasp and glance at what we've done in rookie draft so far. And Vandy, you and I both kind of talked about that last week or 2 weeks ago, so we can certainly let our guest talk about his exposure to certain rookies. Because I guess any dynasty news that either of you want to address or talk about, topics that you quickly want to touch on before we talk some rookies?
I just want to say that every piece of camp news that you get is completely actionable. You should believe all of it. You should act on it and act on it quickly. Every tweet is true. Every one catch from a running back in the flat with shorts on and no pads means he's going to eat this season, and you should make decisions accordingly.
And everyone should trade their picks to you, right? As well as that part of that.
Something exactly. Like that. Anybody that believes in that, please come join one of my leagues. I'll be glad to have you.
There's an expression. It's I can never remember it, so that's not why I do it properly. I think it's buy the news but sell the hype. When something does happen, actual newsworthy does happen and changes, then that's when you buy. But then there's all this hype. That's when you're selling off, because all the hype is sort of can go in waves. I think that's supposed to be how it is, unless it's the complete opposite. Then I'm sorry, I messed everyone up. Welcome to the Gambit. It's a risk either way, I guess, when I said it. It's a risk every time I open my mouth.
No, yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah.
Okay, well, I hope I did that correctly. But certainly looking at a page that Brian was generous enough to share with me to help ease this, a couple questions, really 3 rookie questions for Brian. And the first is players that he is most exposed to. I know, Vandy grad, you and I spoke last week about our specific players. We may touch on them again, but certainly encourage everyone to go check out the Dynasty Gambit episode from a couple weeks ago. So we'll talk about Brian's players. I did realize I probably should just do the ad drop now before we forget. So there's a QR code. Oh, perfect. Doesn't cover Brian's face. Awesome. That I'm glad that went well. But yes, as you can see on screen. Oh, never mind. There he goes. Sneaking around, Brian. But there is a QR code there. And for those on the audio format of the podcast, we also appreciate listening to this. Our promo code is GF2. And what do these promo codes do? Well, it's part of our sponsorship with Underdog Fantasy. And if you have not yet signed up for Underdog and you use either the promo code or the QR code when signing up, they will double your deposit up to $100 on that initial deposit when signing up. So if you max out and put the 100 in, you'll actually have $200 in your account right away to use on all of Underdog's contests. You've got pick'ems for games or for player stats in different games and different sports. NBA, NHL, NBA finals starting tonight. NHL Stanley Cup finals are starting a couple nights from now, so that excitement's happening. It's June, so the CFL starts this month. I can't remember if Underdog has CFL stuff or not, but they should because it's a big sport. Important football, yay! But yes, and of course, best ball drafts. We're a fantasy channel. That's our favorite part is the best ball drafts. So again, if you want to participate in all these Underdog best ball drafts again, and you want a bit of extra cash to do so, I encourage you to use the promo code GF2 or scan the QR code, and then they'll double your deposit. I guess one last plug that I don't want to forget to do is the PLPs. So if you go to the goingfor2.com website, there's a section, Personal League Podcasts. And I know we've got one coming up in a couple weeks here on the Going for Two Live network. And that's something we're doing differently with them this year. So Personal League Podcast, meaning you, the consumer, are paying for a private podcast where we will provide insights about your specific league and get usually 4 to 5 different of the Going for Two analysts together and divide the teams. And each person gives insight on specific teams. We also cross over, help each other out, and provide actionable insight for what we think these men could be doing with these teams. Provide examples of moves to make. And I believe June 16th, Friday, so 2 weeks from now, we'll be broadcasting the most recent one live. So the advantage of that is the people in the league, as part of the people paying for the PLP, they can actually come in and interact with us in the chat. So we decided to do that new this year. Done it twice so far. It seems to have gone over well with the people. The first one we did was actually with a league that we had done 2 years prior. So they were used to the old just audio, which they certainly enjoyed, but it seems like they've really jumped at the chance to have the live interaction. So new feature this year. So again, head over to goingfor2.com/PLP to get all the information on that. Jamie's here. Last thing, and we get into interaction, right? The live interaction. The Cleveland connoisseur, quite the connoisseur of Going for Two content. So really appreciate Jamie for always supporting. All right, let's get that Ford truck rolling. And we'll pick up where we left off talking about most rostered rookies. So, Brian, I'll let you reveal, the top of your list. You can go as far down as you want. I know we'll get to maybe some more specific questions on players in a bit, but feel free to talk about your rookie exposure share so far.
Yeah, so just for context, I pulled this from my spreadsheets. It includes rookie drafts. It also includes probably a couple Debbie leagues if I have shares there, and it also includes a couple startups where the rookies were already involved. So it's not necessarily that I got every single one of these shares in a rookie draft, but most of them. And also, just for reference, I have 40 plus leagues. So when you're thinking about like percentage exposure when we're going through this, that's kind of like it's going to be 40 plus by the time the next couple startups are over. So I don't know, maybe like mid 30s, high 30s now. So if you're looking at these numbers as far as like a percentage of my leagues, just that's kind of a reference. My number one is with 8 shares is Tank Bigsby. So for me, Tank is a combination of being higher on the player than most going into the draft, being higher on the player than most coming out of it. I think he's going to have a bigger role than a lot of people expect. In Jacksonville, I'm definitely knocking Etienne down a few pegs in the ranks, and also I think those are reflected in what I thought was a criminally low ADP. And so you put all those things together and, I wound up with 8 shares of Tank Bigsby, whose current ADP from the data that I'm looking at is still 212, right? And that's just, for me personally, criminally low, a full round behind Charbonnet, when really I think they're pretty darn even as far as their outlook for 2023. And they were pretty close as far as prospects go anyway.
Yeah, I think I've got Charbonnet and Bigsby like one spot apart in my rookie running back rankings. So yeah, a full round seems to, and maybe that's a combination. I guess I know you like Charbonnet. I know we talked about this on the live reaction show, but that was one guy you were being banging the drum for was Tank Bigsby, and you weren't as afraid of the landing spot with Etienne. That was kind of your immediate take, and it seems you've held true to your word and drafted so much of him.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
Vandy, anything to say about Tank Bigsby?
No, I mean, I think Bigsby offers definitely value there. Like you said, being a full round different than Charbonnet and Walker being there to split carries. I know we were split, but I'm definitely on the side that I think Charbonnet's landing spot hurt him quite a bit in my value, and I actually like even Miller personally better than Charbonnet. So.
Yeah, you know my thoughts on Kendra Miller. I won't bore people with more propaganda from that. But to continue to talk about Tank Bigsby, what are the ranges where you've drafted him? Like, what's the earliest you've taken him, and what's the latest as far as you can remember?
Yeah, so the outliers are probably like 204 is the earliest, and then like 303 is the latest. It was mainly like between, I don't know, 207 and like 212. Yeah.
Which, yeah, I've seen him go in that range in a lot of places. Mid to late second seems to be the spot. So anytime he fell to the third round, that seems like that's a tremendous value. I don't know if I even saw that once. So good for you to grab him there.
Yeah. I mean, I'm more than happy to let people take, Jonathan Mingo and Rashee Rice and Kendra Miller and, I mean, freaking Hendon Hooker's ADP is 207. Like, go ahead, have him.
Yeah, I was more optimistic on Hendon Hooker than most, and even that seems like the 301 seems like a good spot for him. Even maybe the 212, but anything earlier than that's a little too rich for Hooker for my taste.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Second on your list is Dalton Kincaid, 7 shares of him. So I'd imagine that's a lot more in the first round than I guess he didn't take Bigsby in any first round, but not so different ranges there between Bigsby and Kincaid, and maybe to your point, you're getting Kincaid instead of a Charbonnet. Because you can get it, and I don't know how many drafts where you had both Kincaid and Bigsby, but if you have that mentality of you don't want to take the running backs there, Kincaid does seem like a logical choice at the back end of the first.
Yeah, Kincaid's interesting. There's it's kind of died down now, but maybe, I don't know, a week or a little more ago on Twitter, there was the great Kincaid debate, and people are saying you don't take rookie tight ends, with early picks, and invest a lot of capital. And I would say that in general, that's true. I don't think they're wrong. And I also don't think they're wrong. Like, shout out to Bo McBrayer, who said that he takes issue with people who think his route running is on level with wide receivers. And I don't think he's necessarily wrong there either. But for me, those two things are eclipsed by the idea that the NFL is changing. The way they use and deploy the tight end position is changing. The prospects are changing. The 12 personnel is going to be increasing. You're seeing teams move to tandems of, sort of a more athletic, for lack of a better term, move, tight end who's going to be, I don't know, sort of big slottish, and then more of a closer to the inline one. You saw that with Musgrave and Kraft. You're seeing it with Kincaid and Knox. You're seeing it in other places too. And so I said on the live show when we, it was like the 6th or 7th round and we were just kind of BSing about stuff. When it comes to Kincaid, you're not drafting a typical rookie tight end. I think Mayer is closer to the typical rookie tight end. Certainly Kraft is. But when you're looking at Kincaid, you really are drafting the Buffalo Bills wide receiver 2, right? Now that doesn't mean that he's as good a route runner as Khalil Shakir. It doesn't mean that he's as fast as whoever like Gabe Davis, right? What it means for me is that they're going to deploy him in the slot more often than not. That he's going to be heavily targeted because they were missing that sort of intermediate threat. That he's a better player and a better pass catcher and a better option than Shakir or Gabe Davis. He will open things up, I think, for Gabe Davis more deeply. And so when you look at a late first round draft capital, they traded up to get him. The GM and everybody's been talking about like his elite hands metrics and how they're going to use him in 12, and they expect to see nickel even though they're in 12. Right, like everything except for the one little quote from the offensive coordinator like a couple of days ago that people are seizing on about like, oh, it remains to be seen how we use him. Well, listen, the guy who gets paid like triple your salary, who drafted the guy, wants you to use him as the slot receiver. So like you may want to listen to that and stop like doing the smoke. Like
that could also be he doesn't want to tell anyone how he's going to use it. He already knows in his mind that the plan is.
He doesn't want to give up any info. So all that put together, and then you move to a tight end premium league, right? Which is really pretty much all I play, right? Some 1.75 or 2.0. Some start 2 tight end plus the premium. And then you're saying, I'm not going to burn the 108, 9, 10, 11, 12 on that ceiling, lean into that ceiling of like a special tight end that could be that wide receiver 2, that is not that typical tight end, that is essentially the Anthony Richardson of the tight ends, that you lean into that ceiling, that you make that bet instead of taking Flowers or Levis or Charb or Devon A-Chain. Yeah, I'm going to lean into Dalton Kincaid. There's a 2.0 that I traded out of the 106 to the 107 because I knew the person wasn't going to be taking Kincaid in the 106. They took JSN. I got Kincaid in the plus, which was the guy I wanted anyway. And I just don't understand how, the same people who could agree with the argument of like all factors considered, lean into Anthony Richardson's ceiling, are then telling me I can't burn the 109, 110 on Dalton Kincaid. I just don't get it.
Do you have any explanations, Brian, for that and this perplexing case?
I mean, honestly speaking, I'd be right there with Brian. Kincaid's better than traditional, quote unquote, traditional tight end. But like he was saying, in a tight end premium league, let's just say, for instance, that you're drafting him at the 110. Well, who was drafted before him? You got 3 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, and you've still got room for the top 3 or 4 wide receivers that you like. So at the 110, you've already had 9 players selected, and Charbonnet's is being selected like in a lot of leagues there at the 1.12 or 111 or whatever, and Levis. And I mean, yeah, why not?
There's a lot of players I'd rather have than Levis, but I think the one thing with Kincaid is that he really separated himself from the rest of the tight ends, A, by being the only one drafted in the first round, and B, ending up in probably the best landing spot. Like you could argue Sam Laporta's depth chart that he's on currently is the easiest for him to climb because we can dish on Dawson Knox all I want. We can expect them to maybe run more 2 tight ends, but Dawson Knox has done far more than Brock Wright, James Mitchell, and Shane Zylstra. But at the end of the day, being tied to Josh Allen is the biggest appeal of that Bills offense. So like Kincaid separates himself from the rest of the tight ends because draft capital and landing spot. And then the way I look at it, we're talking, 10 players. There were 10 players for fantasy at these 4 positions drafted in the first round. So to me, 10th is probably the latest. And then, that sliding scale of Kincaid versus the receivers really just come down to the premium. If it's start 2 tight end, that's, to me, it elevates him to, I'm probably taking him 105 ahead of Gibbs. The super flex quarterback scarcity, I'll still probably take the quarterbacks. But it's start 2 tight end. That's where I think I'd really I'll take Kincaid over Gibbs. I'll take him over any of the receivers. So that sliding scale between 105 and 110 really just comes down to the settings. But absolutely. I couldn't imagine letting him fall beyond 110. I love Kendre Miller so much, and there's no way I'm taking Kendre Miller ahead of Dalton Kincaid, even in just a straight PPR league. I think
you should talk to my co-host Jesse from Dynasty Fever, and I'm saying that not just to plug, but to say that he hates Kendre Miller, won't roster him even for diversification purposes. I'm certainly in the middle of you two. I don't love him as much as you or hate him as much as him, but I'd love to hear you two talk about it.
Yeah, that would give people quite the fever when talking about such a hot, heated discussion about Kendre Miller.
Yeah.
So I noticed you numerized this, so it made it really easy. There's 29 rookies that you have 4 or more shares of. And we talked about the 2 at the top of the pyramid, and then
So that's roughly like a 10% plus share of rookie. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do notice a lot of the quarterbacks in there. I'm seeing Richardson. I saw Stroud. So yeah, I guess how much of this list did you want to go through in terms of those names there?
It's your show, Brett. I'm just here to be pretty and do what you want me to do.
Well, I guess talked about the players we've rostered. We've mentioned quite a few names. Well, we've mentioned a couple names already, but I guess and maybe you've already mentioned some of the names that you're fading. But there's 2 categories of the players you don't have or have very little of, and one I would say is I have little of this player because I just didn't get the opportunity to draft him. And then there's others where I'm actively fading. And I think I gave my examples last week of, I don't have any CJ Stroud or Bryce Young. I would like to get them, but any the opportunities where I would have had those picks, I traded them away. And then just most of my picks ended up either being, I got a 1 Bijan, 1 Anthony Richardson. But other than that, it's been mostly mid to late firsts. So I just don't have any younger Stroud, not by choice, just kind of the way those picks are falling, versus a Michael Mayer, who I've got as my tight end 4 among the rookies. So to me, I'm actively fading his, sometimes late first in tight end premium leagues, but even in conventional PPR scoring setting leagues, still a mid second. I think I passed up on him at a 208, I believe. Took Marvin Mims instead, just without the tight end premium, just rather would invest in the wide receiver position. So that would be the difference of Young and Stroud. I don't have any, but not by choice. Whereas Mayer, it's been actively fading him at his price. So
just out of curiosity, I'm assuming Kincaid and Laporta, and who else do you have in front of?
I really like Luke Schoonmaker. He had the better relative athletic score to Mayer. I like the quarterback he's tied to a lot more. We don't even really know who Mayer's quarterback is, but even if it is Garoppolo, I like. We've seen Dak use the tight end enough, and I'd imagine he's there long term enough. To me, he's got a couple of young guys to fight with, and that could be a headache of a depth chart. I still believe enough in Austin Hooper to think that Mayer's not immediately coming in and erasing him, even though I admit that might be a possibility. But I guess just questions about that upside. And there's no way Schoonmaker's not going close to Mayer. And I think that's more the idea of, I don't have any Laporta either. As much as I like him, I don't love those prices on tight ends. If I can get Schoonmaker, specifically, it's been Schoonmaker, Kraft, and Strange, getting them 3rd, 4th. I mean, I just picked up Kraft off waivers. So, I like, just because I'm part of the crowd that doesn't love to invest in rookie tight ends, but there's enough intriguing prospect profiles here that I want to make 3rd and 4th round shots, but I just don't love taking one in the 2nd. And I'm willing to stomach Kincaid again at the end of the 1st, as I've mentioned. I don't actually have any, but that's not entirely by choice, because the leagues where I would want him, he's going before that 109, 110.
Yeah.
There's a 2 PPR league where I ended up with the 110, and then had to settle for Zay Flowers, which I'm fine with, but knowing that 10th was the threshold of those 1st round players. So anyway, that's a big explanation. Hopefully that is everything anyone.
I don't hate Schoonmaker ahead of him. I was higher on Schoonmaker than consensus going into the draft. So I don't hate that at all. I think it's tough because in general I agree, but then again, it's are we going to get ahead of the curve of these shifts in the NFL? And maybe the data hasn't caught up yet with, maybe the class before this class, and moving forward with Brock Bowers, who's a smaller that it might be worth now the investment of, these late firsts and these mid seconds on
this
these
top
guys.
Tight end in Dynasty might expand to a 7, to an 8, or 9, where it's there's more difference making 5 or 6.
Yeah, we'll see. But as far as players I have not much of, so for example, A-Chain, I only have 3 shares of. That's mainly actively trying to limit my shares. Those are only diversification shares, or had to make the pick share, or I want to trade him share.
That's what I was wondering. I wonder how many of those 3 shares are going to be off your rosters, because I know you.
I would the minute there's a TikTok video of him busting a 60-yard run to the house, he's going on the block.
Or doing sprints alongside Tyreek Hill and catching up
Right.
close. They're like,
Right,
oh my
yeah,
God, he's so
yeah.
fast.
You know, and then so like another category might be like a Mingo or a Rice, where I have 3, and it's like it's not because I'm fading them, but also I'm not like upset about it. Like, okay, you know, that's cool. Like, you know, I can make a case for and against both of them. But then there's like a third category of like, oh, I only have I have very little of this person, and I'm kind of upset about it. And that would be like only 3 shares of JSN, only 2 of Addison and Flowers. Let's see here, some of the names that matter more. Only 1 Kendre Miller, which I just was never in that pocket. Like I thought if I had the 202, like I thought, and then like some jabroni would take him at like 112 or 201, you know, and it just didn't work out. Or like maybe I wanted to trade up to diversify and get some Miller or whatever, and it just wasn't happening. I don't know that there's too many guys that I ended up with 0 of that I'm all that upset about who matter. You know, like I'm looking at my list here, and like I don't know that anybody cares that Antoine Green, the UDFA to Detroit, is a guy that I have 0 of and I wanted more of. You know, but so yeah, I think those are pretty representative. Like, oh, Hyatt and Hooker, like I was pretty much not really into them, especially Hyatt before the draft. And I ended up with like, I think 1 of each, maybe. It just was really hard to, when Hyatt was on the board, for me to tap that button when there were other choices. I never really liked him going into things. Plus,
it's funny, we were opposed on Hyatt before the draft, and I have 0 shares. So I've also found that.
I thought I'd end up with more of him because now he's all of a sudden becoming affordable where he's worth the risk. And there was just still, if I was at 211 or if I was at 302, there was just still guys that like I'd rather take a shot on. And I may end up wrong.
Or Mims, yeah. Like I like those second rounders, and I was even higher on Downs as I was Hyatt before the draft. So
I mean, those guys were long gone by the time Hyatt was going in my drafts. Like,
okay,
yeah.
Comparing to the running backs, like a Tank Bigsby, perhaps.
Oh yeah, oh sure. If Hyatt and Bigsby there at 211, like I can't run to my phone fast. Well, my laptop usually to click fast enough for Tank Bigsby. Yeah. I ended up with 3 of Levis because he was just more affordable, and that's more of like the, what if I'm wrong, or like quarterback at a super flex might be able to flip him kind of thing. But like I was actively avoiding Levis. Yeah.
There was a ton of him going at like where you're taking Kincaid, like 110, 111.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But I did notice a couple drafts where it was like 207, 208, maybe even sometimes like the 211. Vandy, I don't know what you saw much with Levis. Like, was that like kind of a big difference in like where he would go draft wise?
Yeah, I missed the question. You were asking about Will Levis?
Yeah, exactly. Have you seen like a big disparity sometimes in the first, sometimes late second? Like,
I mean, honestly, Levis was consistently, like I'm sure both of y'all, all my leagues are super flex, and he was consistently late first. I mean, as sad as I hate to say it, most leagues that you're in, your quarterbacks, there are teams that are strong at quarterback, but it's hard to develop depth at quarterback. So even if the guy's not that good in our minds, he's being drafted late first because you don't have depth elsewhere.
So let me make the case. Let everybody sit down and strap in. I'm going to shock the world and make the case for Will Levis. And I don't mean for Will Levis, the player. I mean for rostering Will Levis, right? First of all, he became more affordable in your rookie draft than perhaps he was going to be.
He might have been the 105, 106. Yeah.
And some people, if they were like, yo, if he gets taken number 2, like the rumors are, I'm like, okay, fine. He was, to me, essentially a first-round pick in the NFL because Tennessee, I'm going to assume Tennessee tried to trade up into the first round. And what did they run into? At 29, New Orleans, who has a reputation, it seems, for not really trading out and trading down. Number 30, there was no way the Eagles weren't taking Nolan Smith at 30 after he fell to them, and they have so many Georgia Bulldogs, etc. Right? And there's no way Kansas City, with 100,000 of their fans there, wasn't going to take the hometown kid at 31. So I'm operating on the assumption. Oh, and then Joey Porter, hometown kid to Pittsburgh. So I'm operating on the assumption that Tennessee tried to trade up and get Will Levis, because
for some reason Dallas preferred to take a defensive lineman instead of trade down.
Like, I think it's pretty credible that they tried, and just like with the price was probably too high. I think
I've heard those rumors as well. It wouldn't surprise me.
And then picture a world in which Tennessee is 1-5, and Tannehill is 6 weeks older. And they just say, screw it. Let's see what we got in Levis. Right. And the minute he's named a starter, you can trade him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the case for having a couple shares of Levis, I think. Yeah.
It makes sense. It's just like you said, you just have to go with the thought of trading him, because you don't expect him necessarily. You don't expect the Tennessee quarterback in general necessarily to be a good fantasy option. Steve McNair was the last good fantasy option at quarterback for Tennessee.
Well, I've had high expectations for Tannehill. He's done well some of those years, but the years he was tied to A.J. Brown really was the peak of it, though, unfortunately.
They're going to run a lot. They don't have great pass catchers. They're not going to be a winning offense. So, it's not going to be a position that you're probably going to love this year.
And that's the worst thing. Derrick Henry's, as dominant as Derrick Henry is, eventually he's going to be on his way out. Then what do they have? Traylon Burks?
Tajay Spears, Hassan Haskins. So,
and the tight end, you can't name his name. He looks good on paper, but
Chig Okonkwo, yeah. Chig something Okonkwo.
Chigoziem.
It's Chigoziem? Okay. I always thought it was Chigoziem. Which makes people laugh, like Brian. But yeah, so I guess the one piece of news that has kind of occurred since our last episode was DeAndre Hopkins released by the Cardinals.
Yeah.
My favorite landing spot for him would be the Titans, because it's a wide open depth chart. More selfishly, Tannehill's my most rostered quarterback, so that would certainly help Tannehill if you give him a target like Hopkins. But like from Hopkins' fantasy points perspective, like he's seeing the main share of the targets, and so I think it's a competitive enough team that, like, if he wants to win, that might be the spot where, like, they can pay him and he has a chance to win. So maybe I'm kind of like quietly, not quietly, because I'm talking about it on the live stream right now, but not so quietly hoping he goes to the Titans. But
they had a respectable. They were in it for a while last year, with bubblegum and scotch tape and elbow grease.
Well, they were like 7-3, and then Tannehill got hurt, and it just all fell apart, and they lost a bunch of games in a row. So. Yeah. I think there's worse quarterbacks in the NFL than Tannehill, and he might also see that, like, okay, for the ones where I want to get paid enough, Tannehill might be the best option out there. And I hope he stays healthy all year. Hope that the team doesn't decide to just run it with Levis. Maybe there's too much risk where he won't go there. But
people are gonna go crazy if he goes to like the Chiefs. But honestly, like, that's just him ring chasing, and he will be completely fine. He will put away the diva when he gets 2 targets every week because they're feeding Kelsey, or like the 1 week he gets 7 targets and the next week he gets 0, because that's the way Kansas City offense works with wide receivers, and he'll be fine because he's gonna win a ring, right? Like,
it didn't seem like the weeks where Will Fuller was going off, or even the random Kiki 12 target week. It didn't seem like he made a stink about that, because at those points they were winning. Really, the last year in Houston and kind of I guess the year without him in Houston, Watson's year fell apart. So his time in Houston, when Deshaun Watson, there was a lot of winning. So like we didn't notice too much of the diva stuff until it pertained to like the coaching and like how they viewed it, not so much how his teammates viewed him as a diva.
So honestly, I think there are certain spots that people like for fantasy that I think are just better for his ring chasing that aren't great for fantasy, like Kansas City. And I would say maybe Buffalo too might fall under that category.
He specifically named, I think, 5 teams, and those 2 are among them. I think that's why people have talked so much there. I think the Eagles would be awful. Like, at least on the Bills and Chiefs, he could be the wide receiver 1, or maybe the Bills probably wide receiver 2. But the Eagles, like that's a tough top of the depth chart to fight for. The back end of the depth chart's easy to get, but like Brown, Smith, and Goddard, and how much they like to run, that'd be the worst one to me of the 5 he mentioned. Like
Well, the worst thing is if he goes to the Eagles, it not only affects his value, but it potentially affects Devontae Smith and or Goddard. At least to some degree. I mean, it wouldn't blow him out of the water, but basically A.J. Brown, to me, would be the only one whose role would be definitive.
Yeah, I think we'd still view him as a top 5 dynasty wide receiver. And I've traded for Goddard and Smith this offseason, so that would just be perfect. Luckily, I picked up Tucker Kraft in the league where I traded for Goddard. Oh, no, I'm relying on a Packers 3rd-round pick under Gutekunst. That's not good. Refer back to a couple of Full Press Packers pods episodes a couple weeks ago as to why that's not good. But yes, I guess Vandegrad, we'll start this one with you. What's the strangest thing you had seen so far in any of your rookie drafts?
Well, the only thing that I thought was a little odd. I mean, my leagues have been pretty standard. I mean, looking at the pretty much average draft position, everybody's pretty much gone pretty much case to the point. But the strangest thing I saw was Jahmyr Gibbs at the 1.02 in the Superflex League with 12 teams where several of the teams really didn't have great quarterback rooms. They decided to go with Gibbs over any of the 3 quarterbacks. So to me, that was a little odd.
Yeah, I'm just going to let me pick up there real quick. So there's a segment of the Dynasty community that, I think was really, they were ready to take Gibbs in front of at least Stroud, if not also Young. They make a good case for it, right? For me personally, it was a little too cute in a Superflex. And maybe it's just because of, like my sort of hard and fast rule about Superflex, or because I'm probably not as in love with Gibbs and his outlook as like some other people are. Like people are putting him in the top 5 running backs in Dynasty, and I'm just like, what? So maybe that's part of it too. But that was one of the things that I didn't see much of in my drafts, but I did see in some other people's drafts was Gibbs ahead of some of the quarterback. I never saw him ahead of Richardson, though. That is kind of silly, I think.
Yeah, Fantasy Pros currently has Gibbs as the Dynasty RB6. So, that Fantasy Pros is a combination of a lot of different websites. They have the RB6.
So, Brian, how about you? What's the strangest thing you've seen? Because I guess you hadn't seen Gibbs at 102 yet, so that might blow out of the water. But
it's hard to say. It's not that like all my drafts were so chalky, right? But there wasn't anything that was like really strange, I think, that I can remember off the top of my head. I will say that I'm a little uneasy about the confidence some people seem to have in Rashee Rice. And I think I was seeing him go ahead of guys that I'm like, okay. And I was a guy who I would have considered myself a Ricer, going into the draft. When he was going at like the 3.04 or 05 in mocks, you know what I mean?
Almost around later than where he's kind of going now.
Right. I think we're falling into a Sky Moore trap here. I think there's reasons to like Rice more than Sky Moore, and I personally have Rice ranked, above Sky Moore in my Dynasty rankings. I don't know, man. He's gonna right now, until proven otherwise, he's one of 700 wide receivers not named Travis Kelce on that team. Right now, again, there's reasons to like him. He worked out with Mahomes. Mahomes requested him. Mahomes is talking him up in camp buzz. And there's traits about him that we like. And if he's gonna assume that Juju role, like that Juju role That kind of sounds like a song, like the Juju Roll. That Juju Roll probably produced the best out of like the wide receivers after Kelsey. You know what I mean? Like, there was weeks where I was hammering Juju as like a mid wide receiver value in DFS. You know what I mean?
Before that first concussion, he was pretty consistent. Yeah.
Right. So there's reasons to like him. I'm not saying like I'm completely fading him. You know what I mean? But like when I see him going at like, 203, 204, 205, and guys like, Josh Downs are still on the board. Obviously, I'm a Mimser. I love me some Mims. Sam Laporta still on the board, right? In some leagues, Michael Mayer or Kendre Miller. Like I just, and even I might even flirt with, taking Jamie's Roshan ahead of, Mingo and Rice. And I just think that we might be falling into a bit of a Sky Moore trap with Rashee Rice. I want to be wrong. I liked Rice, but we'll see.
I will say to the point of the Sky Moore, McCole Hardman, like those guys were pretty regularly, like Sky Moore, almost every league last year I saw him, he was a first rounder. Yeah. And McCole Hardman was usually like sometimes a first rounder, but usually that early second. I've seen a lot more mid to late second with Rice, so I feel like people have learned a little bit. But like to your point, Brian, there was one league where I could have taken Rice and I chose Mims over him. So really, you would approve of that decision. That was maybe the hardest draft decision I've actually had because I did want a share of both. Ultimately went with Mims though.
It's interesting you bring that up, and I completely agree. Comma end or comma but. I was looking a while back, like right before the draft, and then when Rice got drafted. Sky Moore didn't have to take as big a leap to get into the 110 from his April ADP to his May ADP as Rice was taking from the 305 to like the 205. So like he's going a half round later, and maybe we learned, but like, Sky Moore didn't have to take as big a jump to get into that, like it's a trap range.
Enough. Okay.
You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah, the move up is about the same amount of where they are. Cause I think a lot of like more people, like people were probably surprised that Rice went in the second round this year, especially if like Downs and Hyatt didn't. Whereas I think everyone was almost maybe expecting Sky Moore to be a first rounder last year and was almost disappointed with the fact that he fell to the second round. So yeah, you're right. The profile wise, people were higher in on more to start.
What's going to be fun too is if Mingo and Rice hit, like it's like there's going to be a film people victory lap on that one.
Because the Mingo analytics numbers are not very good. So yeah.
The worst thing about Rice and any other Kansas City wide receiver is that most of the fantasy football community sees the part that it's great to be tied to an outstanding offense. What they don't see is the fact that targets vary from week to week. And besides Tyreek, no one wide receiver in the last 5 years, ever since Mahomes been quarterback, has really had much fantasy value.
I think, like Brian Ford was saying, I think Juju, got 100 targets. That's probably like outside of him, I think, and Tyreek in that Mahomes era, you're probably looking at like a max of a 60, maybe 75 targets for any single wide receiver.
And Tyreek had that special ability to go deep, but also they haven't seen a second wide receiver, and probably never will, that has the ability to run after the catch like he did. So.
Well, that's one of Rice's strengths, people say, you know what I mean? But like like they also have been talking up, again, Camp Buzz, who cares? They've been talking up Tony as like now he's got an off season to learn the offense and blah blah blah. And he's got a lot of competition there. And Van de Graaff brings up a great point. Like people say, oh, it's just a great offense. I want a piece of it. Like that's not always true with every offense, because like the only piece I want of Kansas City is they're named Mahomes and Kelsey.
Yeah, exactly. And what I don't want a piece of a bad offense, but there are several above average offenses out there that I might rather have pieces of. So,
yeah, it's not an exact science of what's that line of good to bad offense, but you'll kind of
and I mean sometimes big slices of small pies are worth more than small slices of big pies. Like this is the way it works, and it's a matter of trying to figure out which bets to make. And people like Kyle, who will sit there and go through the tedium of making projections, I think probably have can feel better about the foundation for the bets they make. Whereas somebody like me, who maybe, who doesn't sit there and I'm not going to do projections for 32 NFL teams. You can go, whatever, kick rocks. Like, I'm making bets on things that are just, like my base knowledge and not numbers. I don't know.
I love doing projections, but that's time consuming if you want to do all 32 teams. I did it 2 years ago. So yeah, it's fun. But it can be cumbersome.
Yeah, Ryan Surfoss does a really good job with that too, here at the Gore for Two Network. And I guess I was talking about, people are learning, but I will say I did see Rashee Rice go 107 in a one quarterback rookie draft.
Okay. One quarterback, it's different. Yeah.
But that's my only Anthony Richardson share, actually. Anthony Richardson share, and I got him at the 210. I was shocked he fell that far. So that was pretty wild. But I got to say, probably the craziest thing I've seen, and certainly the most shocking, is in a multiverse league. And so the scoring settings kind of change every year. Last year, it was very restrictive and no flexes and 2 tight ends, 2 quarterbacks, and kind of a tight end premium. So it's meant to be kind of like a sort of a tight end dominated league, but also with the 2 quarterbacks to make quarterbacks valued. And this year, it's completely flipped. It's just start 1 quarterback, back to 1 tight end, no premium. We have to start 5 wide receivers, and it's full PPR. There's reception bonuses as well. More points.
Dynasty?
Yeah. Well, and that was the idea of the league. That's why it's called the multiverse league. And so we knew that going in as well.
Yeah, I could never do that. Like, because I'm trying to build a roster, and I can't count on the settings to be similar year to year. Like, you're asking me to put in money and invest in, tight ends in a year when the league is 2 tight end, and then magically it's not. Like, and now I'm stuck with all these tight ends, and I still have to give the $50 to the pot. Like, I don't know, man. I wouldn't do that, but that's just me.
But anyway, all to say, this year it is a 1 QB league, and it seemed like the rookie draft reflected that, because it was a startup last year. We didn't do a rookie draft, so this was really the first time we've seen a rookie draft. Like, how does that exact thing, like the change of the scoring settings, how does that affect it? And the quarterbacks all went in the first round. It wasn't to the extreme of the other 1 QB league I was in, but Richardson went 107, Young 110, and Stroud 112. But I think the craziest thing that happened was Zay Flowers was the 103.
Wow.
He went ahead of all the other receivers. That's the only spot I've seen that happen.
What's the name of Jeff's team in that league?
Jeff's not in it. It's actually
I know. I'm kidding. He probably took Flowers is what I was saying. I was just joking. He's a big Flowers guy.
Yeah, no, that's true. He is. That's right. But yeah, it's that, like, I saw one league, Brian, Vadigrat, sorry, we're in this league. Gladys, for the Going for Two family, she took Jordan Addison ahead of JSN. And literally those are the only 2 rookie drafts I've seen where JSN wasn't the first wide receiver. Mm-hmm. So that was more than anything shocking.
I know it's out of the ordinary, but it wouldn't be that bad, I don't think, for Addison over JSN. I mean, I personally like JSN better, but I think it's a closer call than we all make it out to be.
I do kind of view them almost all as one big tier, which is why I've been kind of saying I'm okay taking Flowers ahead of Kincaid in the right spots.
I'm not there. I'm not there with that. I think there's a big gap between JSN and the rest of them.
And I think, and that's why, to your point, Brian, like, I think almost every league it's been JSN as the wide receiver 1. But again, you'll occasionally get someone who thinks Zay Flowers is the next Antonio Brown, or apparently. So that's why he's going 103. But yeah, that to me was probably the most surprising thing I've seen in any of my rookie drafts. So yeah, we've talked about Gladys, who will be she hosts 2-point conversion on Monday nights, and in no particular order on our alternating Thursdays. So of course this Thursday it's a Dynasty Gambit, but next week Gladys will be hosting in no particular order. So check that out on the Going for Two Live network. One more to preview is, and I'm pretty sure you guys are on it 2 nights from now, just 48 hours from now, a little less than that. The Dynasty Saturday Night 5, featuring our guest who co-hosts that. And to honor that, we're going to talk about our top 5 Dynasty players at each position.
Look at that. Kyle, the king of transitions.
So yes, everything. If it's quarterback, right? It's quarterback world. We can always start with quarterback. And I think to be like when what you're seeing in startups, it seems like there's a clear almost top 9, certainly top 8. I know Brian, when I was on the Dynasty Saturday Night 5 maybe a couple months ago, we debated that QB9. Is it Watson? Is it Kyler Murray? If Tua didn't have the concussions, it might even be him. Like, does Anthony Richardson now become that? I think that was maybe not something we discussed. We could discuss, but however you view it, it seems like that top 8 to top 10 seems pretty solidified, but there is room within even maybe for that top 5 to be a little different. So we can let the guest go first. And Brian Ford, who are your top 5 dynasty quarterbacks?
Yeah, it's not going to surprise people too much. It's pretty chalk. I've got Mahomes and Josh Allen as 1, 2 in the first tier, and then Hurts, Burrow, Herbert as 3, 4, 5 in the second tier. I've seen Burrow ahead of Hurts. I flirted with Trevor Lawrence being ahead of Herbert there for a while. I just think, with Kellen Moore and I think some tweaks to the offense, and I think it was just a down year for Herbert. And as much as I don't love Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, they can't have as bad injury luck as they did last year with both of them being off the field at the same time all that much. Eckler's Eckler, he's going to do his thing. And, as much as I'm down on QJ relative to pretty much consensus, there's definitely upside there as another weapon. If he can catch the ball, and he can position himself where he's not getting beat up by smaller DBs, he's got real yak ability, which they didn't really have much of in I was about to say San Diego and for the Chargers last year. So
not much yards after the catch in San Diego either, though, to be fair.
Yeah, I've got Herbert back, pretty solidly back up in my top 5. So that's my top 5 for quarterback.
Yeah, I think to me 4, 5, 6 is probably where I have the hardest. I'd go Mahomes, Allen, Hurts. I think 1, 2, 3, and then from there Burrow, Herbert, and Lamar. I could come up with an argument for any of those 3 as the QB4, QB5, QB6. I think I'd probably right now. I think my rankings have Burrow 4, Herbert 5. That would kind of finish the top 5 as well. I feel like Burrow probably has almost the most. Not even like the weekly floor, because I think that definitely belongs to Lamar, but sort of the season end floor. Like he's going to put up enough yards and touchdowns, at least, especially as long as he's tied to Jamar Chase, that he'll almost every year finish as a top 6 quarterback. But he might never elevate into be the QB1 any year, where I feel like Herbert and Lamar maybe have that more within them. So between those 3, it almost seems like safety and upside. And maybe, to be fair, Lamar actually maybe has the most weekly safety and potentially the highest season-long upside, to where he should actually be the 4. So I'm kind of struggling, especially now that he's got that renewed contract. They've added Zay Flowers. As much as we may not be the biggest fan of him, it's still kind of the investment in the passing game. So Lamar is probably the quarterback in the top 10 that I'm struggling most with his exact positioning right now.
I can see that. Yeah, I have a tier of 6, 7, 8 of Fields, Lawrence, and Lamar.
Yeah,
and I'm not one of those people who says Lamar is a running back playing quarterback. I do think he has a lot of flaws in his passing, but you can design an offense around both his running and passing skills. My worry is that so much of his value came from those legs. When they're going to pass more now and not run him as much, will the increased passing make up for the likely loss in rushing that we'll see? I'm not so sure.
And it's funny because, as I mentioned, the timing. I did a startup. I believe we began in March. And I traded up to get a second first-round pick, and I picked 106, 107 and took Lawrence and Fields and did not take Lamar. Again, the timing was he had not signed that contract yet, so I was a little worried. Okay, give me the 2 young guys still on their rookie contracts. If I had to redo that startup now, I'm probably going Lawrence and Lamar. So that's, again, the struggle of where that is. Vandegrad, can you help ease our mind here with your top 5?
Mine's a little bit different. But I will say this, my frame of reference is possibly a little bit different than other leagues. My league of record, which is kind of my biggest point of reference, we have points that are added for completions over 18. The longer the touchdown pass, the more points. So I have less value for running quarterbacks than I do for passing quarterbacks. That's just me. So my top three are probably no different than anybody else. I've got Mahomes, Allen, and Hurts. I mean, that's pretty much seems to be relatively somewhat consistent across the community. 4, I went Burrow, and 5, I went Lawrence because I really like the weapons that are being built there in Jacksonville. I'm not being a Steelers fan. I'll never be a huge Lamar Jackson fan, and I just don't. I don't know. Fields needs to do more in the passing game than others. My 6 would be Herbert, and Lawrence and Herbert are pretty much a toss-up. I mean, to me, but I just went slight lean to Lawrence in this case.
All right, yeah, it's interesting. I'm guessing just with the Hurts, even though like you're talking about the points per completion, you'd still have him at 3. Is it because like the sheer number of rushing touchdowns he can have, regardless of the points per completion? Like if you're putting up that many 6-point touchdowns, it'll just raise him up.
He's just a unique skill set that Fields doesn't offer and Jackson doesn't offer. He's, like you said, the rushing touchdowns. He's a better passing quarterback than either one of those two guys. And yeah, I mean, it would be nice if he has more passing touchdowns as he progresses, and maybe he will. But he's just a unique skill set with so much rushing and better passing. So he's an outlier in that top 5 for sure.
So before we talk about running backs, Jamie has a question regarding a running back. Try to trade away Zeke to get the 207 in a 10-team league. I'm guessing he's trying to get Roschon Johnson, right? That would be kind of the range, I think. And so he just kind of offered a couple of options here. Maybe things he's thinking. I don't know if these are offers he's gotten, but Zeke and Wandale for the 207. Zeke and I think it's the 24-second for the 207.
So I think it's somewhere in the middle. If you offer me Zeke and Wandale, I'm going to tell you to take a hike. If you'll
just take Bigsby, right?
If you offer me Zeke and a 24-second, I might take it and run. So I mean, I just was telling Jamie, if I were him, I'd just wait for Zeke to sign and then just trade Zeke. Like, I don't know like how many shares of Roschon and Kendre Miller do you need?
Like, Kendrick's not falling to 207 even a 10 team, and if it is, I to be fair, actually, I have seen him fall that far in a league or two. Never mind. Yeah, I'd be okay offering this one, Zeke and Wandale personally, and I guess this is contingent on when is this rookie draft happening. Can you afford to wait a little longer, or is this like 207 like on the clock right now, like a limited time frame where you can actually make this trade? I'd be okay with it. But if this rookie draft is still a couple months away, I like what Brian was saying, just waiting for Zeke to sign, and that should boost his value, at least with the certainty that A, he's playing, and B, we know what the situation looks like.
Yeah, and I mean, like, so Jamie, I guess my question is, like, is there somebody on the board where you're like, oh, crap, he fell, we better go get 207? Because, like, if there isn't, like, I mean, like, and like, what's your next pick, right? Like, if your next pick is like 301, like, or 210, like, is there really like how flat is the tier between who's on the board now and what you're gonna get then? You know.
Okay, so it looks like this draft is happening right now. We're at the 110. Also have the 202, 203, and 210.
What do you need the 207? Like, I hate to say, like, what do you need the 207 for? But like, what? Like, I don't get what the. Like, is the person with the 207 like in a hurry to hand it to you? Like, what's the goal here? I guess is my question. Are you just trying to get rid of Zeke? Because you can do that for like a 24 third and a 24 fourth and just be done with it.
You know? Well, that's what I was gonna say. I'd almost rather get picks next year that would allow me to, like, not that I necessarily even want to make those picks in 24, but like in season, those can be traded to get players where you could have more certainty. You can kind of know what you're buying. Spot starts for players. You can usually get spot start quarterbacks for thirds. depending on the league. Of course, some leagues may cost more, but I've seen a lot of super flex league where those quarterbacks we know aren't starting for the whole year. The rebuilding teams will usually just take thirds for them.
I mean,
short benches. You don't really want to accumulate the extra picks now. You want those because those future picks aren't going to take up bench spots. The picks now will as soon as you draft them become players. So yeah. But to know that it's short benches, though, I do like the idea he's thinking 2 for 1, right? Can I trade away 2 lesser assets to get 1 better asset? So that's why I still don't mind the Zeke and Wandale for the 207. Kind of gives him more control. But yeah, definitely do not do this one. The Zeke and the 24-second for 207. No. Like I wouldn't want to give a 24-second for the 207 in this context. Like I'd rather, to me, the 3 things here, the 24-second might actually be the most valuable piece.
If I had all those seconds that they have and short benches, I would want the 24-second rather than the 207.
So yeah, so if you can trade Zeke right now for future picks, could you even get a 24-second right now for Zeke? I think I'd do that because people are maybe so cognizant on this draft, or do the opposite. Add Zeke to the 210. Can I get an earlier second this year and then like just a future pick next year, or even just, a second and a third next year? Like I might want to, like, that might be intriguing. So anyway, so options there for sure. But yeah, as JB says, Zeke's a cuttable asset with the short benches, right? So again, doesn't, suppose if you really don't have the spots, you can always cut him. But yeah, there might be chances to sell him a little higher if you can, again, stomach it. With so many rookie picks, he probably is needing to make cuts, and that's probably why he's thinking having to make the trade now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Zeke and Wandale for a 24-second, and maybe even get something else thrown in because it's a year away. Like that would be maybe the perfect target to try and trade. You get rid of these 2 guys, you're getting something in the future you can use better. So rather than target the 207, target 24 seconds. Maybe people will be able to let go of them more likely, and Zeke and Wandale can get you one of those. Because as Brian Ford was saying, he's not selling the 207 for Zeke and Wandale. He sees that offer. Running back with no team, that's kind of eating a lot of miles, and torn ACL wide receiver who is tied to Daniel Jones right now. Like, it's not so appealing. Just take the rookie. Vandergrad, any other thoughts?
No, I probably shouldn't, because I'm a Wandale homer, and I'll still believe in him. I mean, Zeke I'd give away for about a 12-pack of beer, but I mean, I still have value for Wandale, to be honest with you. So
I don't hate Wandale. I just don't think that's enough for the 207.
Again, especially the context of the short benches, you want to do as many 2-for-1s as possible. So the look of the trade in theory is good. So I get why Jamie's asking this for sure.
Vandergrad, are you worried that like he's a slot guy who relies on like cutting and quickness, and he's coming off the ACL? Where like if I didn't rely, like if I wasn't an agile guy, and I was a quarterback, and ACL doesn't matter as much for me, or like, does that worry you at all, especially when there's like 42 slot receivers on that team? Or is it more like, hey, he's talented, he's got Dable and Kafka, like he'll be cool?
I kind of missed part of the question. I'm sorry, Brian.
Yeah, so with Wandale, are you worried that he relies on like cutting and agility as like a slot guy, and he's coming off the ACL? Or is it more like, well, he's talented and he's got good coaching, so he'll be fine?
Yeah, that's a fair question. It really is. I'm going to say the talent was there before the injury, and I don't know. I mean, I still think he'll be okay. At least he's not going for the deep route, so we'll see. I still like Wandale overall, but I mean, I guess like y'all said, it really depends on who's there at the 207 as to how you feel in terms of what you're trading for it, but. Zeke doesn't offer me much if I'm the 207 guy for sure. I'd be like, he's not even with a team right now.
Yeah.
So to me, your Wandale by himself is probably not enough coming off an injury. So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Zeke's definitely not in anyone's top 5 running backs, I don't think. So Vandergrad, do you want to start with your top 5 RBs?
Yeah, I'll go with mine. I tend to go older guys, to be honest with you. I'm the kind of guy that until you prove it to me, I don't have a lot of value for you just yet, unless you're just thought of so much higher than everybody else. So Bijan's number one, just because. Then after that, I went old. I'm older, not old. Taylor, CMC, Eckler, and Brees Hall. And my number 5 guy, I could interchange him with pretty much 5 through 9. I wouldn't be unhappy.
Yeah, that's very similar analysis to me, that 5 through even 10, 11. I think I've got like Chubb and Jacobs at the end of that tier. Like that could be, easily to connect them. But yeah, the top 4 you said are my same top 4. But I've got JT at number 1, baby. Let's go. Career year coming with Anthony Richardson. But just to the point of, we've seen running quarterbacks kind of elevate running backs, especially running backs that don't rely on receptions. Like we've seen Jonathan Taylor.
Look at the timing. Well, hold on a second. We talk about running backs. You flash your JT shirt, and PJ here makes a JT comment in the chat. This was orchestrated. This was a conspiracy. I'm out of here.
Hey, running back's all about timing, right? And yes, so yeah, PJ and I agreed Taylor as the Dynasty RB1, but then right after that, it's Bijan. There's not any other player I could put it. But then I like what you're saying, Vandegrad. CMC and Eckler are such difference makers as producers. And I know Brian Ford has given me slack for this, elevating Cooper Kupp and Tyreek Hill and Diggs in my wide receiver rankings, having them all in the top 10 over a lot of big tier younger guys, for that same reason of, especially rankings from a startup perspective, those elite warp producers, like wins over replacement, there aren't as many of them as there are a bunch of young guys. So I feel confident I'll take the early shots on those older elite producers and thinking I can get a bunch of young guys later, essentially. So that's why I'm fine with CMC at 3, Eckler at 4, and I'll even push it with Barkley at 5. Although I'm not so confident in that one. That's probably the one guy in the top 5 that I'm less confident in his exact ranking.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen like Josh Jacobs, Travis Etienne. I've seen those names bandied around.
Last year, I think I had Nick Chubb in the top 5, so I'm not that far off of having him up there. But let's hear what Brian Ford has to say.
Yeah, I mean, so I can respect JT as number 1. I didn't have Bijan as number 1 until like a week after the draft. Like I held out, pretty long relative to some other people. But I think between trying to calibrate for the fact that I'm generally slower to bring rookies up than I should be in the past, and that market value plays a little bit of a role in like the formula for whatever degree I have one in my rankings, like Bijan's 1. Now, I don't have him in his own tier as 1, like a lot of people do. Although based on value, if I was doing it just on value, he probably would be in his own tier. But
you see where he's going in startups relative to a Taylor.
Yeah, and what you could get for him in the trade market too, right? Yeah. So so I got Bijan, JT, and Brees Hall 1, 2, 3 in tier 1, and I got CMC and Saquon as 4, 5 in tier 2. I think there's a stretch of running backs that I have in tiers 3 and 4 between 6 and 15, where I'm almost like, if I don't get one of those top 5, and I probably won't, because for me it's hard to pull the trigger on a guy as old as CMC or Saquon in a startup. Like if I'm not getting one of those top 3 guys, like I might just go like full on like 0 RB and wait till like my RB 16, 18, 20, from there, depending on how the board was developing. Yeah.
Seems like Jamie's got the same top 3 as you, with JT and Brees both up there. PJ Kennedy just mentioning a couple names. Chubb, going to have a monster year. He also really likes J.K. Dobbins, and I think
I love Dobbins as a buy. Yeah, I don't like Chubb as a buy. He's a sell for me.
I think I've got Dobbins in my top 12. I think he's right, maybe number 12. Like I think he just makes the cut. But yeah, do think the year removed, the full year removed from the injuries with Dobbins, expecting better season for him this year, presuming he can stay healthy through the training camp and preseason again.
I think
Wide
he's
receiver,
going to catch a few more passes than people are used to him seeing too. So yeah,
just the nature of the offense, right? If they're throwing more, that's eventually just the running back that's on the field is going to be catching more targets, or just seeing more targets and presumably catching passes, because he's had a pretty good catch rate when he's been targeted.
yeah, and he was okay catching passes in college. He just ended up on the Ravens and also injured.
Well,
Oh, Chubb.
I just want to ask it also for the audio people. PJ's asking, why are you selling Chubb? And that is his question. He's saying Watson's going to be very helpful for him. But that statement right there is probably why he's selling Chubb, because people are perceiving Watson to help him. Maybe Chubb's value is maybe not quite hitting RB5 like I had him last year, but better than, say, when no Kareem Hunt, right? I've also been trying to sell Chubb right now because of that. Like, does Kareem Hunt resign, or do they bring in someone else? Like, right now, it's not a great time to sell running backs, but it seems like he might be someone that is a good sell now, because his situation may change for the worse. I don't see his situation getting better between now and the season. So
yeah, June 1st is not a great time to sell run. But if you are going to sell running backs, if you want a fuller explanation, you can go on the Dynasty Fever audio feed now and look at episode 76.3, I think, where I talk about selling Chubb. But no, so Chubb's coming off his best season as far as total yards go. But when you look at the age apex and things like that, like, if you're going to sell Chubb, you better do it now. He's going to be 28 in August. Watson may help him or not. They've said that they want to pass more, and everything they've done with their personnel is saying that. Right, like bringing in Elijah Moore, drafting Cedric Tillman, not adding a lot to the backfield, which in some way helps Chubb, but also in some way tells us they're not looking to, I think, run the ball 700 times a game like Stefanski used to. So sure, there aren't loaded boxes, but at the same time, the pass rate over expectation is gonna be higher. So it's just a matter of, like, where are you settling in there? And our friend PJ leans into that's going to be good for Chubb, and I'm leaning into he's 28 in August, is going to be a free agent at the end of this season, I believe, right? And so they may run him into the ground and he'll get a lot of yards. But he's also very cuttable. Like, at the end of this season, like, it's the last dance for Nick Chubb, to borrow a phrase that my friend Jesse used for Saquon Barkley. Like, if you have Chubb, unless you really think you're going to be like a top 2 or 3 team in your league, there's pretty much no reason to hold him when you can, like, tier down and get a plus on certain running backs. And I mean, I have Chubb at he's RB17 for me. So no, he's a big sell.
So that might be this question from Jamie might be pertinent: Chubb or Pollard?
Oh, smash Pollard. Yeah.
Brian, what was Chubb for you? RB17?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
My only concern is, if you're selling him, I mean, I don't disagree necessarily with the ranking. I'm okay with it. But if at RB17 is the sell, are you really getting anything in return? That
I'm selling my RB17 for somebody else's RB8.
Because I was going to say, like, that's pretty low than the consensus. So yeah,
I'm trading with Kyle. Kyle thinks he's RB8. I pretty much know Kyle thinks he's RB8 or whatever. So, like, he's my 17. So he's a sell because I'm below market, right?
Yeah.
Kyle's market. I'm below market. It's a sell opportunity because I think the market's too high on him. So I will end up with a guy I might even like higher and get, like, there are leagues where you can get a plus on top of Dobbins for Chubb. Guarantee you there is, especially if you're trading to a competitor, who's going to be in the top 2 or 3 teams in the league, and that is a smash for me.
A little cross promotion here. Apparently, Jamie's found the latest episode of the Full Press Fantasy Pod, because I actually had B League on. We talk about some things like rookie drafts, so gotta love the B League rants. Wide receiver top 5. I feel like there'll be less contention among us than running back.
I'm sorry. Just let me ask you guys this, right? So sure. on May 30th, this is all Superflex, tight end premium, 12 team. Nick Chubb went in a sleeper league for a 24 second and a 25 first. My pants get tight when I hear I can get that for Nick Chubb.
It's funny because I have tried to sell him in a couple spots for a first and a second and have been unsuccessful. Now I've been trying for 24 first, like give me both picks in 24. I haven't tried to push that first out to 25 yet.
If you're a James Cook believer, I'm not. James Cook, a second and a third. It's not too bad. If you're a Cup believer, especially for this year, he could have good points per game. If everything doesn't fall apart there, you can move Chubb and Ridley for Cup. Right,
well, I really don't love Ridley that much. That might sound appealing, because the problem with Chubb you're making a 1 to 2 year investment. At this point, that's kind of what you're making with Cup. But I would expect Cup's going to outscore Chubb. So yeah, I don't mind making that pivot. 2 older guys to get the more productive elite older guy, which again with my rankings, how high I have Cup. He's not going to make my top 5 dynasty wide receivers, but I think I've got him at 6 or 7. So.
If you're a Rachaad White believer, I'm not. Rachaad White and the 112.
My problem is all the teams I have Chubb, I seem to have Rachaad White on.
But then today,
yeah, I love that.
He went straight up for DeAndre Hopkins, and it's like that makes me want to check Twitter if I missed any DeAndre Hopkins news. So I don't know what people are giving him away for D-Hop.
Yeah, like I'd rather have Chubb at that point.
Yeah,
I don't care what the news is, even if there was like the most explosive news forever. That's an awful trade.
I think the first few trades Brian was talking about, I think those are good sell prices on Chubb. The way PJ is so high on him, you might almost want a little more than that. Now, the idea, PJ, is how many leagues do you have Chubb in, and knowing what other managers in those leagues feel the same. Because there might be instances where you don't get those prices for Chubb, and your best option in this case would be just to hold him. And then when he's smashing in season like you expect, that's when you sell him. But if there's someone who in your leagues believes like you do, that might be the time to sell Chubb. So it's market dependent, but like really it does come down to your league market and what those specific managers would actually sell for it. Like who have if you want to tear down the running back, who has the running backs that you're willing to tear down on. If you like White, who's got Rachaad White? If you don't like Rachaad White, who has a J.K. Dobbins potentially? Or I really like Ramondre Stevenson. I don't know if because of the lack of draft capital associated with him. That's again another guy who's younger, but you could maybe get a plus added on to Ramondre.
And let's talk about just real quick before we get to wide receivers. I'm sorry. So that was like in a trade, right? But like, what if somebody watching or listening is in a startup and they're like, "Yo, but I like Nick Chubb, right? Like no loaded boxes, 1,500 yards last year, right? Okay, fine, but he's going at the 504 in ADP, and you can get J.K. Dobbins at the 607." Right, you can get Derrick Henry at the 606. You can get Dameon Pierce at the 601. Right, you can wait to the 804 to get Miles Sanders. Right, like
wow, yeah,
you know what I mean. Like
it's not an awful price to pay, but there are alternatives for cheaper within that are comparable.
So and people have been saying this a lot lately, and I'm glad it's getting out there. We don't hate players, we hate values.
Yeah.
Value, price, ADP, whatever you want to call it, it's all about cost, and in a startup, I'm not paying a 504 for Chubb when I can pay an 804 for Sanders, right?
Again, someone as high as me, like that, I did a couple startups where that seemed like I was trading away my second, third, and fourth picks, try to accumulate future picks because I'd want to take Chubb in those ranges anyway. And get him in the 5th round, perfect. And I could use him as my anchor running back. Those are the types of teams where like I have him now as part of that. I think there's one team that's just overloaded with running backs. So I've got McCaffrey, Eckler, and Chubb, and that's been the league where I've been trying the hardest to trade him, but to no avail with the prices I want. So I might just I'm going to overload my opponents with running backs through the year, and PJ's just Kyle's burner. Do you think I've got time to make a burner comment on YouTube? Like, you really think, like, I'm hosting this show, Jamie? Like, we are far in.
So no, I said that.
Oh, sorry. I just assumed that was Jamie. Oh, all right. Yeah. Host Brian, co-host, guest Brian is messing around. But yeah, let's get to wide receivers.
Yeah, sure.
So again, this might be pretty common top 5. I think it's probably the top 5 where I've have personally in my rankings that fits convention the most. So I'll just start with mine and we can share ours. Justin Jefferson 1, Jamar Chase 2. You can sell me on Chase ahead of him, but for now, I'll stick with Jefferson. CD Lamb 3, AJ Brown 4, and then with the addition of Aaron Rodgers to the Jets, I've raised Garrett Wilson to wide receiver 5, which on the community consensus seems to be kind of a common thing. Seemed like I kind of saw him and people already kind of ranking him there, even when it was just rumors of Aaron Rodgers or just how well he ended. So yeah, that'd be my top 5 for now. Vandegrad, do you want to, any differences in yours?
Yeah, I mean, the only one I would highlight is I put Waddle in for A.J. Brown.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen Waddle be ranked up there as well. Yeah, that's another one like Wilson, young guy that's been elevated. How about you, Brian?
So I have the exact same top 5. So I have Jefferson and Chase 1, 2 in tier 1. My tier 2 is Lamb and AJ Brown, and I've seen Lamb sneaking into the late first in startups now. That tier though, especially at cost, I don't know that I want much of it because I can tell myself a story where things don't go well in the next year or two for CeeDee Lamb and AJ Brown, and where I do want to maybe look at is my tier 3, which is wide receivers 5 through 9. But even then, I think there's some caution, right? So 5 through 9, Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, T. Higgins, and Amon-Ra St. Brown. Very begrudgingly having.
I was going to say that's you. When we talked a couple months ago, you had Amon-Ra outside the top 12. So
yeah, it's taken a while, but so and the reason I say even some caution there. Wilson. For me, that's more of like a talent, draft capital, love the player sort of thing. I don't know that Rodgers really adds much. I think he's going to be don't mess up the game. We're going to run a lot and play defense. I've got, especially early in the year, he's going to lean on Lazard and Lord knows Randall freaking Cobb, right? So I don't know that Rodgers really adds that much to Wilson for me. I know it might in the market. But I just think Wilson is just a hell of a player, and so I think he's special.
Just the numbers he put up as a rookie season with,
right? Yeah.
I mean, Mike White was okay, but after that, absolute trash at quarterback most of the year.
Yeah, and I've got Waddle at 6, but I don't know that I'm paying Waddle prices for Waddle now, especially in a startup. And I just want to bring up this point real quick. So in startups, right? Like it used to be that like the sharp move was to trade back, right? Whether it's productive struggle or not, like you were trading back, right? And now everybody wants to trade back. So like trading back got a little harder, and then it was like, we build our dynasty teams around wide receivers, right? Well, now everybody does that, right? And so there's now, I think, some sneaky value here and there at running back, and particularly also at veteran wide receiver. Right. The guys that you like, which, by the way, I have right below that. Hill and Diggs are my 10 and 11. So, for example, Jalen Waddle coming off the board at wide receiver 6 in a startup isn't outrageous to me. But when you say he's coming off in a startup at the 208, right?
I've seen him go earlier in some startups too. Like 208 isn't even that outrageous of a price.
Ahead of like, for example, names not, including but not limited to Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Travis Kelce, Saquon Barkley, Gibbs if you love him, Pitts, Walker if you still believe, Tua, right? Do I spend the 208 on Waddle, or do I spend the 407 on DK Metcalf?
Oh yeah, I mean that's, to me, I think I've got them maybe 2 spots,
right?
Or even 1 spot apart in my dynasty ranking. So yeah,
do I spend the 208 on Waddle or the 304 on Tyreek Hill? Or the 310 on Stephon Diggs.
Exactly. Yeah, that's
right. So, like, it's not outrageous to have Waddle as a top 6 wide receiver, although some folks, like friend of the show, Tom Tipple, might say so. Where I start agreeing with Tom is when you look at it with ADP and in some cases market value and trades. That's when things get a little nutty for me.
Because the names you were saying, especially at other positions, there's some quarterbacks there I want. Like if it's especially any type for a tight end premium, if I can take that edge and just get Kelsey early. I feel like I've got that edge. I can then build wide receiver depth later. I can't really build a tight end aggregate like Kelsey.
I mean, he's going ahead of Stroud and Young too. So if you're somebody who wants to push Stroud and Young up there, then you know,
especially if you've gone quarterback, like one of those elite quarterbacks to start, you get a second young guy. You've got that quarterback group pretty solidified. I think to put what you're saying, Brian, with a question here from PJ, are we really buying Cup in Dynasty? That would be the way I'd want to buy him. Can I get tier off the younger guy? I'm losing years, but I think the production, especially if you feel like your team can compete, the production you're getting from a Cup this year would be so much better than a Waddle, most likely. But because of that startup price, if you're selling Waddle to get Cup, you might actually get another piece added to Cup, whether it's picks in the future or a second player that you could put in your lineup to, again, augment the chances of winning. Those would be the ways I'd want to go buy Cup. Tier off a T. Higgins. Tier off.
The worst thing that happens is not enough people draft by tier. You might draft Waddle and still have 3 or 4 other guys in your same tier with Waddle. Because like I said, my number 5 is pretty interchangeable. But then at running back, you might have the last guy in the tier that you really like. So who would you rather have at the draft position?
So let's say you're a team who, and maybe this is a topic for another show, but like I'm trying to get out of the thought process of like contend, rebuild, and just kind of always be contending, but not always old. But anyway, but say you're a team who's looking to compete this year, right? Waddle and Irv Smith for Cup, Cousins, and a 24th third. Superflex.
Yeah, super flex. Can I get Irv Smith or his quarterback? I guess it's not his quarterback anymore. But yeah, no, I
agree with PJ. There is a non-zero chance that things in over the Rams look terrible this year. That Stafford's elbow and back are start to accelerate. That the offensive line doesn't hold up, right? And all of a sudden, Kupp, who was actually like number 2 in like fantasy wide receiver points per game last year, like for the games he was in, I think, right? Like
I think he was ahead of Jefferson, to be honest.
Right. Maybe this is the year, right? Like where things start to, dip, and it could be a real messy year there. Now that's in the well within the range of outcomes, but as it stands now, like there's not too many trades that really isolate the value of those two players all that well, but like. Kupp the 107 and a 24 second for Waddle and the 106, right? So say Kupp, Addison, and a second for Waddle and JSN. Like I want the Waddle and JSN side probably in that, right? But like if I'm competing, I know that Addison probably has a better floor for 2023, right? And I get a second for Spice. I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, PJ is actually sharing his top 5 receivers, and Jefferson, Chase. It's kind of like the Bijan and Taylor. Almost everyone has one of those two as their dynasty RB1 right now. Almost everyone will have JJ and Chase as those top 2. AJ Brown 3, Waddle, and Garrett Wilson. So again, not as we've said, like those are common sites we're seeing in dynasty leagues where Waddle and Wilson have been elevated into that top 5, top 6. So I guess we'll end with tight ends. A little tight for time, so we'll let the guests go first here. Here, I'm going to flip the screens around so your face isn't covered by the Dynasty Gambit logo. But yes, go ahead, Brian Ford.
Yeah, so tier 1 is Pitts and Andrews. Tier 2 is Kelsey. I know people still love putting Kelsey, like he's my Dynasty tight end 1 until he retired. Like I get it. I can respect that. Like that's cool. And then my tier 3 is 4 through 7. And that's Hawkinson, Kittle, Goddard, and Kincaid.
Okay, who's the 7th? That was my question.
Right.
But I guess Kincaid makes sense there.
So I'm a little murky on some of that stuff, though. Like I there's a world in which Addison eats into Hawk, and like, are the pass attempts really going to be like 900 billion like they were last year? Kittle certainly you can really make a good case. He's a sell candidate. Dallas Goedert, in his defense, a couple years were with Zach Ertz. He's never had a top 10 tight end season, right? He doesn't score touchdowns. And then, of course, Kincaid's a rookie, so who knows? So again, it's kind of like until some of these tight ends in the rookie in like last year's class and this year's class, and Brock Bowers and company next year develop a little bit, tight end is still give me the top 3 or 4, or I don't want nothing until later. I think, for me, there's like a huge swath of tight ends I have from like tight end 8 to 17 that are just like, I have 2 tiers there, but like, could it be even 1 tier? And like my tier 6 of like tight ends 18 to 25, like 2 or 3 of those guys could be top 12 tight ends this year. So tight end is tight end, right? It's just like, but let's talk about, for me, I think that what stands out here is the choice to keep Pitts at 1. And it's just, when he was healthy last year, when you look at his peripherals, his metrics, right, for like targets per route run, yards per route run, target percent, right, like it's really, really good. If he scored a couple more touchdowns in his rookie year, right, had a little better touchdown luck, people would not be saying like he's been a fantasy bust. He broke 1,000 yards as a rookie. You want to talk about the tight end who's really a wide receiver? Kyle, it was, I liked Dalton Kincaid when he was called Kyle Pitts, right? And the offense is going to improve this year, right? Like I think that's an example of where like the pie will grow enough where like it's not going to hurt Pitts to have Bijan in the slot sometimes, or like have it be a little bit run heavy, right? Like Ritter's better than Mariota, not great, better than Mariota, and so like I'm leaning into Pitts, and I think the market is starting to tick back up on Pierce. So I think that buy window, Pitts. So I think that buy window is getting slowly shutting. But I think there's definitely some leagues where you can get him for lower than I think you quote unquote should be able to. So I think for me the choice, like this, not that it's spicy, but like the thing that I think it is the conversation piece is like, do you choose to put Pitts as 1, or do you still stick with a guy like Kelsey or Andrews?
Yeah, Kelsey, Andrews 1, 2. I might even be enough of a rebel to say Pitts is at 5 ahead behind Hawkinson and Kittle. The one thing I'll say about Kittle, career high in touchdowns last year, and a lot of that was with Brock Purdy. So I think the argument for Kittle to not sell him is if you're banking on Purdy winning that job and winning it long term, that might be what elevates. Because here's the thing that Jamie's brought up. Can you see Njoku will be top 5 in a couple of years? Got him top 10 now, but the older guy's going to die. Kittle and Njoku are from the same draft class, so I don't get why like he's viewed as younger than Kittle. I guess Kittle's body is probably older than his actual age because of how much he's been injured. But like to me, I don't know. You talk about Goddard hasn't really shown it. Like from a points per game standpoint, he's shown more than Njoku has. So that's why it'd be tough to elevate either into the top 5 for me. But I would more likely do it with Goddard than I would Njoku because I don't really.
Are you
he's
sure
not a spring chicken either.
They were the same class?
Njoku and Kittle? Yep.
Yeah.
I'm almost positive on that.
All right. So Njoku's born in 96.
And I do remember Njoku was really young coming out as his draft year too. Like that was so one of the things.
Hasn't quite turned 27 yet this year, and I think Kittle's pushing is already 29. He's gonna be 30 in October.
So yeah, I think to me, like to
they
your
were
point,
the same. They were the 2017 draft class, but like Njoku is like a full 3 years younger than Kittle.
How many years did it take Juju to finally be older than every rookie that came out every year like that right? So the age is
Will Levis is older than, or only 2 months younger or something like that than Trevor Lawrence, right? So
yeah. Oh man, age is just a number, right? But yeah, like to your point, Brian Ford, I think I would rather raise a Kincaid can be because we haven't seen it yet, but if he could ever figure that out, that would be more the candidate to me to raise into the top 5. I think that top 5 is pretty locked in right now. Again, I have Goddard easily as the 6th, but it also feels like easily as the 6th because he feels like he's a tier away from Kittle, Hawk, and Pitts ahead of him, but he's also kind of a tier ahead of everyone behind him.
And then you say, well, okay, Brian, but Kittle's a rookie. I mean, Kincaid's a rookie, right? So okay, make case for me that Freiermuth has the ceiling with Washington added there.
I mean, I just think it's
in
doesn't
that
have the ceiling because
offense.
he's tied with Kenny Pickett more than anything.
get-
That's the problem.
to
More than
put
Washington.
into that tier of 4 through 7.
For sure.
Tell me Darren Waller, who's essentially, I think, the wide receiver 1 of the Giants, and I actually put up a couple ticks in my rankings. Tell me Darren Waller at age 30, 31, I'm going to put in that tier of 4 through 7 with, with those guys. Tell me David Njoku, who has flashed brilliantly and is tied to a good quarterback for once. Can we justify putting him in that 4 through 7 tier? Greg Dulcich, who I like, who's my tight end 11.
Yeah.
Again, he's flashed very good route participation when Russ was playing, but it's a Peyton offense. He likes to, spread things around. They added Mims, there's reasons to think that, probably Dulcich might have might be the best bet to put up in that 4 through 7 tier, even though I have him at the bottom of the next one. I think simply because of age and the coaching, but I still can't make the argument that he belongs up with those guys right now, right? So whatever. So make me move my tier marker up 1, and I'll put Kincaid at the top of the tier, and whatever. You just can't. You can't make the argument for me to have any of those guys leapfrog Kincaid at the moment, is what I'm saying.
For sure. So first off, JV's saying he sold Chigakonkwo for a 24-second. I don't think we'll be talking about Okonkwo in any other context. Just to say this, and PJ is right, Kincaid could flop, but I also think, to what we're saying, he might still have he has probably a higher bust rate than those other guys we've seen at least produce in the NFL. Sure. But he also probably has a higher chance to match that top 5, as rare of a chance that is, relative to all these guys we've seen it not do it for so long. The one name you said is probably Darren Waller to me, only because we have seen him do it in the past. Yeah. But injuries and age, and as much as I can rip on Derek Carr, probably better for tight end production than Daniel Jones will be. So those things kind of work against him to where.
And the thing is, PJ says, I know no one wants to hear that. And I know it's fun to think that you're contrarian and against consensus to say Kincaid could flop because, so there's so much hype around him. And I get it. I'm a guy who doesn't like to lean into hype and likes to go against the grain and not be with the herd. I get that. But I have news for you. Most people who are in on Kincaid, like myself, know he can flop, have put that in the calculus of when to pick him with the late first. And it's not that we don't want to hear it. We've already told ourselves that. So just, calm down.
So hot take, Jamie saying Troutman is the best tight end in Denver. I still have hope for Okwebunam, but that's.
We had Zara from Football Guys on Saturday Night 5, and he was saying that that Cecil from Football Guys, who covers the Broncos,
right,
was talking about watch out, Troutman could be a thing, right? Peyton likes him, went ahead and traded for him when Troutman requested the trade to Denver, knows the offense. He used multiple tight ends, when he was a coach there. Now, he still also used Taysom Hill in a lot of spots, and Troutman didn't get the run that a lot of us wanted him to. So it's not like I'm putting my chips in for him, but I could see it. I think there's a non-zero chance that Troutman ends up being the best tight end in 2023 there. But
I took him super late in the startup, and just bypassed the Dulcich and even Okwebunam price to maybe get a shot at him in a 2 tight end premium league. It was 20th round or something. Enough to where let me just take the shot. If he turns out something great, if not, I've got other options at tight end I can put together. I guess Vandy Guy, we haven't heard your top 5 tight ends, so if you want to share those.
Yeah, they're very similar. I'm not quite as high on Pitts as Brian is right now, but I've got Kelsey, then Andrews. I'm really big on Hawkinson at 3. Then I went Pitts at 4 and Goddard at 5.
Okay, so it's those same names that keep coming up, and like we're saying, it does seem like it's tight end 1 is very that's a broad term because the tight end 10 is very much different than the tight end 5. That is kind of a big gap. So I think we've kind of solidified on those 5, 6 that we kind of view as true difference makers. And again, the unknown of Kincaid, maybe he becomes that. I would certainly again think just because we've seen all the other guys not do that for so long, the unknown of Kincaid probably in my mind has the better odds of being that top 5, as slim as they are, than would be to bank on any of those other guys. So to Brian Ford's point of having him as a top 10 guy for sure, I think that is fair and makes sense. But yes, thank you, Brian, for coming on. As we, every minute we're on here, it's inches closer to the next episode of the Dynasty Saturday Night 5. So if people enjoyed hearing this, I encourage them to check out the Going for Two Live network on Saturday night.
Thanks so much for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it. I always love talking Dynasty with y'all, and we still have to plan our crossover sometime in the off season this summer, where like me and Josh come on here and we start a topic and then turn it into like a list of 5 topic on Saturday.
That sounds like a July or August thing. Once Gator's back, we could really get crazy with it. Yeah, for sure. I like that. But yes, you mentioned Dynasty Fever, Dynasty Saturday Night 5. I know you write articles on goingfor2.com as well. So all the work you do.
Yeah, and for those who are just on audio, at @FFJunkie_ on Twitter, you can harass me there. And at Dynasty Fever Pod is my other Dynasty podcast that I do in the middle of the week. It's an audio only one, so you're not going to find it on the YouTubes. And I started doing a little bit of content for RPO Football. I made a couple of videos for them. Just kind of getting out there and stuff like that. And if you're at the New York City live draft for Scott Fishbowl, I'll be there, and you can harass me there too.
Awesome. Yeah, that time of year. Again, thanks for coming on, Brian. Vandygrad92. That is Brian Vandygrad's Twitter handle. Appreciate as always co-hosting with you, Brian.
Oh, glad to be here. Yeah, you can definitely, like you said, catch me at Vandygrad92. I found out it looks like I'm going to be doing some writing for frequency's sake, and probably a total of 3 podcasts this fall. But decided for baseball, I'm just enjoying watching the Reds actually win a game or two. So,
I mean, they're not the worst team in the league.
Do they still have that kid? What was it? Was it Green? He played shortstop and pitcher or something like that at one point.
Yeah, he's pitching tonight actually. Hunter Green.
Yeah, is he good still or?
He's good. Yeah. He's still the number 1 pitcher on the Reds.
Vandygrad and I, speaking of rookie drafts, we forgot to mention we are in a rookie draft together right now in a W League. So yeah.
We're having a good time with that.
You get to DevL up your relationship better, and I could develop my jokes a little better than that. Jesus. That was awful. Yeah. Sorry. We're going to get out of here. I guess it's too late to get out of here to spare everyone from those awful jokes. But if you like that type of awful humor, you can find me on Twitter at Senra Says. As Jamie mentioned earlier, as well as the stuff I do on Going for Two, I also co-host a couple pods on the Full Press Coverage podcast network. Kind of like Brian, that's audio only. But of course, here every 2 Thursdays on the Dynasty Gambit, and those same weeks, the Monday, I also co-host or solo host press coverage. I bring in guests every week. So that next episode of press coverage will be Monday, June 12th. And then that Thursday, which is the 15th, Brian and I will be back here on the Dynasty Gambit. We'll have to confirm with our guests and figure out what that is. Okay. I guess I was going to just head out of here. I disagree with this pretty vehemently on Kmet over Waller and Dynasty.
Listen, as an ex-Kmetter, I feel you. I know that you want to have the optimism for Cole Kmet. He ain't it. He just ain't. The passing volume is not there. He's vanilla. He's not special. I really did think that he was going to get peppered with targets and, he's going to be the next big thing. And my first article for Going for Two was full of Kmet puns, like commitment, committed, right?
You really committed to the bit in the article.
Like, it's time to get out. Like it's he ain't it. Like, I'm not saying he's bad, but like, come on.
I get the sense 7 touchdowns last year is probably a career high. Like the best of Kmet we may have already seen. That's my fear. Bringing in Robert Tonyan probably doesn't help in terms of you've got that other tight end that can actually draw targets. To me, mostly it's DJ Moore, I think, monopolizes most of the targets. They brought him in for a reason. If Justin Fields is going to elevate as a passer, he probably needs to throw to DJ Moore as much as possible and as little to like Equanimous St. Brown and Dante Pettis as possible. So I'd imagine like they're bringing in DJ Moore to use him, and then where everyone else targets fall, that's the whims of whatever happens on a weekly basis. But like, to me, that offense is going to prioritize DJ Moore and no one else. Like, no one else is really going to have the routes.
And they got Mooney healthy too. You know, like Kmet could find himself as like, you know, the fourth passing option on the team. Like,
and I know he was saying like he thinks Waller gets hurt after 8 games. Like, I know Waller's had 2 years of injuries now, and maybe that's it. Like, he's just going to continue being injured. But there were also a couple of like the seasons where he was tight end 3. He played 16, 17 games. Like, he's shown that ability to do that in the past. I think
also, like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just think he's the alpha in the Giants passing game. To me, like the same thing I just said with DJ Moore, like they've committed to, you know, not trade nearly as much. Although I guess the Bears got DJ Moore as part of a trade for the 101. So they didn't necessarily pay too much for him either. But like, to trade for these players, to me, tells me like they're going to commit to them as like big missing pieces, because those offenses needed more weapons in the passing. We talked about that last year so much. The Bears and Giants have probably 2 of the worst receiving cores overall in the NFL, and they've both added these receivers. Like, leads me to think that those 2 receivers, DJ Moore and Darren Waller, are going to get peppered with targets.
Right, and I agree. Darren Waller is essentially the wide receiver 1 there in New York. But also, like, if your argument is I'm betting on or counting on a guy to miss half the season with injury, then like you can't bank on that. Like, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. I tend to try to be injury agnostic. As far as we know, Waller is healthy right now, so there's no reason to bet against it. If he was coming into the season with an injury, okay, sure. But as far as we know, he's healthy right now. So, yeah.
I think Van de Graaff got tired of us talking, wants to go to bed.
Wasn't the outro supposed to be 10 minutes ago? Yeah, it was. But yeah, I guess.
Well, listen, when you have me and Kyle on a show, like, it's gonna go 3 hours. Like, you know,
that's true. Yeah, we're halfway there. All right, so part 2 now. No, just kidding. But yeah, so I guess part 2 of this conversation, not necessarily involving me, but will be again Dynasty Saturday Night 5, which is on Saturday night. So yeah, again, check that out. Really appreciate you coming on, Brian. Really appreciate PJ and Jamie and everyone else who's watching, and all that interaction was great. Super appreciative of all the comments and questions, and love talking. PJ saying we're awesome, and yeah, likewise, PJ. Thanks for that. Appreciate the compliments. Jamie saying we're either on fire, like fire takes, or he wants to burn us all to the ground. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But I guess if he doesn't burn us all to the ground, we'll be back in a couple weeks with another episode of the Dynasty